didn't play the same once he got sober. He also mentioned around that time that Mike was a good bass player. He was a quick learner. He did say that, Ed would tell him what he wanted on the song, and Mike would learn it quick, and he would do it. But Mike was a very good bass player, and he could interpret and play, and he could do all that stuff. But Sam also said that Ed played bass on some songs on Van Halen albums, which I found interesting. But now it had finally come to a head where Ed didn't want Mike there at all. So I think that was kind of like the middle ground where Ed had said, no, Mike, you're not playing on these songs. And Sam had said, okay, but he's going on tour with us or I'm not going on tour.
He said,
I think that was the negotiation.
And Sam said they were mad at him and they were mad at me too. And he's talking about him and Mike. They were still pissed about Cabo Wabo. And by the reunion, the tequila was everywhere and people were always coming up and talking about the cantina. And it drove them nuts. And he said he put it in the contract that Sammy could not wear Cabo Wabo t-shirts on stage or mention the cantina or tequila on the mic. So what did Sam do? What a motherfucker. He bought himself a whole bunch of sleeveless shirts, and he got himself a Cabo Wabo tattoo right on his shoulder because he knew that the big cameras would come close in on him, and apparently it drove Eddie nuts, and there was nothing he can do about it. What did you think of that, Dave? I mean, that was a balls move, right?
Well, that was an FU move.
Yeah.
That was a total FU move. You know the brothers don't want that mentioned anywhere.
Right.
And now you go out of your way to get a tattoo. And Mikey, by the way, he thinks this is funny because he's always tapping Sammy where he got the tattoo. Like,
right.
Hey, how you doing today, Sam? Right?
Mikey.
And Sam's in pain because he just got the tattoo. And
That's right.
He's wearing long sleeve shirts so the brothers can't see it. And all that jazz. It's setting the tone. Sam is setting the tone. So when you do that, and you know it's going to infuriate Ed, what do you think the reaction is going to be?
Oh, yeah.
Come on,
That's for
Sam.
sure.
Give me a break.
Come on, Sam. Give me a break. Exactly. Ed, he said he couldn't get through songs in rehearsal. He was always fiddling with his equipment. You know, we all know Eddie was a fucking disastrous on that. He said he was out of control. He fired the monitor guy. He fired the sound guy. He fired the keyboard tech. He fired at least 5 guitar techs. It was the craziest, most whacked out stuff. I knew it was a disaster. I told Irving. Irving. So apparently they had an intervention at 5150 that suggested Ed should go away for a few weeks to sober up. Sober up! They needed Noel. They needed Noel to go in there and fucking kick ass. So Ed said, fuck you. I will kill the first motherfucker that tries to take this bottle away from me. I left my family for this shit. You think I'm gonna fucking do this for you guys? And Sam on the tour says, I couldn't listen to Eddie. He made some terrible mistakes, and it seemed like he couldn't remember the songs. He would just hit the whammy bar and go, wheedly, wheedly, wee. And he said he listened to Mikey to find his note. He says whenever he came out on stage with no shirt on and his hair tied up in a samurai bun, he seemed all fucked up. He looked like a street bum, according to Sam, and he said post-show, Mike and Sam would shower and grab food and then get in a limo, go to the airport to get on the plane. And Ed would just jump on the plane unshowered, drinking a bottle of wine, and he was waiting for the guys because they were just showering, getting some food. And then Ed was in the plane saying, don't ever fucking make me wait. Without me, you're nothing. You need me. You'll see. At the end of this tour, you guys will have nothing. You're going to have to call on me if you ever want to tour again. And he was smashing the bottle around from inside the plane, and Al finally calmed him down. And Ed searched for Sam at the hotel, but once they landed, and Sam said, forget this. I quit. I'm done. I'm going home tomorrow. But the contract had said that if he cancels, it's severe financial penalty, that it would cost him $5 million to quit outside of medical emergency. So Sam said that Ed apologized, but I was never flying on a plane with him again. It was the Sam and Dave tour all over again, only it was Sam and Eddie. They kept us apart as much as they could. We flew separate, we stayed at different hotels, we drove in different limos, we had separate bodyguards, separate dressing rooms. The only time we were together was on stage. And Sam said, I didn't even think he would make it. I kept thinking each week would be the last. And Ed collapsed and told people he was hit by a car. He would wear the same clothes for a whole week. His solo was nothing but garbage. And Al was throwing drumsticks at him to wake him up. And he would tell the crowd, I'm just fucking around. You people pay my rent. Sam said he would stay away from him completely on stage. And it seemed to me that Ed was going through the motions, like he didn't care about his playing or the way he looked. Ed went out there and just jerked off. The sound guy was burying him in the mix. And Sam said those two often shared a high school mentality. He's talking about Ed and Al. They hated every other band. It was always competitive with them. Everybody else sucked. That was really just so brutal to hear, right, Dave? I mean, it was just so ugly.
The ugliness started at the beginning. I mean, Ed's statement when he had the bottle and said, I didn't give this up for my family. I'm not going to give this up for you guys. Yeah. I mean, that is very damning.
It's just destructive.
It is. And so right then and there, it's up to him, right? I mean, it's always up to him. I mean, that tells you where he is at that point. And the fact that Sam did not know until he was partway through the tour that it would cost him $5 million to get out of the tour, I don't believe that. Because Sam always knew this kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And he had his lawyer read the contract at that point. You're telling me that the lawyer didn't read the contract and go over with Sam beforehand and say, dude, if you want to get out of the tour, it's going to cost you $5 million.
Absolutely. And you know what I don't understand about Ed and his alcoholism? His brother is an alcoholic who actually kicked alcohol. Al's been sober since 1988. He's his brother, the closest person in the world to him. Why couldn't he help his little brother? I never understood that. Like, why couldn't he fucking straighten him out or something? I didn't understand that.
The decision has to come from the person.
No, I know.
You can't force anybody to do anything that they don't want.
Right.
And I certainly don't have any divine insight into the relationship between the two of them.
That's true. So now the funny thing is the last parting words between Sam and Ed. Now, we all know about the Sam Cabo Wabo tattoo, right? So, Sam's got his shirt sleeve rolled up, and Ed rolls Sam's sleeve down to cover up the Cabo Wabo tattoo. This is like backstage. He says, that thing ain't gonna last. You see that? And he shows Sam his Van Halen tattoo. He says, that's better. That's gonna last longer. And Sam says, keep your hands off my shirt. Those are the last words that they ever said to each other. He said they had the worst show they ever had in their lives. Ed smashed his guitars to pieces, and that was the end of their relationship. And that's pretty much where it all closed on the Van Halen portion of the book. What a tragically brutal end, right? I mean, it just got worse and worse.
I know. So sad. I mean, in retrospect, they shouldn't have gone on tour. Not at that time.
Yeah. Greedy fucks who put them on tour and hoard them out. I mean, I don't know how anybody from a medical insurance standpoint could have let Ed go on that tour. I mean, he was just in no position to do so. It's amazing that
I know.
It's amazing he actually survived that period.
Well, and again, he has a work ethic that he's going to go to the show, he's going to do the show, and he's going to finish the show.
Oh, yeah, no, but let me tell you.
Him and Al have always been like that.
Yeah. Now, here's a question, Dave. So, Sam was pretty raw with his description of Eddie in every which way. His words, his actions, the way he looked, everything. Do you think Sam was out of line, or do you think he was just being honest, or what do you think here?
Well, if you see pictures of Ed at that time, they certainly support what Sammy says.
Of course, yeah.
But I think overall in the book, I think, Sam, I think he was more explicit and talked more about stuff than he needed to.
Mm-hmm.
About everybody. I mean, not just about Ed.
Yeah.
I mean, other family members, he talked about stuff that I was kind of like, wow, I can't believe he put that in the book.
Right.
What I find interesting is, and this will be yet another podcast for another day.
Oh, boy.
Is Val did not say nice things about Ed either in her book.
Nope.
And if you haven't read Val's first book...
Oh, we're going to get into that.
Right. You should, because it's interesting, like, to this day, Ed's not too fond of Sam, ostensibly because of the book.
Right.
But Val had her own things to say about Ed that weren't his kind.
That's true.
And those two are talking.
Yeah, but she's the mother of his child. That's a different relationship.
I know blood is thicker than Sammy Red.
That's true, but that's good analogy there. But maybe.
But yeah, I thought like Sam could have said what he had to say. I don't think he needed to be giving away as many details as he did. I think he feels that way in retrospect now. But Sam's like Eddie Trunk. He likes to pat himself on the back and say, I'm going to tell you like it is. but again, it's through his red rose-colored glasses. And there's, in my opinion, there's definitely a bias in there. But I think Sam did not have to give away everything out of respect to other people that were in the book. Yeah, but it's his book. He chose to do it. And he can do whatever he wants. It's his book.
Well, I tell you, what really sticks out to me, though, is, I got to be honest, I know this sounds crazy, but, like, all that graphic sex stuff, like, can you imagine your kids reading that shit? It's like, what are you doing? It's one thing to say, like, I really took advantage of, being the rock star, blah, blah, blah. But, to be like, I was fucking 5, 6 girls at a time while Eddie's playing Eruption, and I fucked so much I couldn't even come. Jesus fucking Christ. It's like, dude.
Well, there were lots of things in that book that I thought, when his kids read this.
Oh, even his wife.
They're probably going to be less than pleased.
Or his wife.
And he had, like... I think he had like adult or close. His 2 sons, right? He had adult kids or close to adult kids.
Yeah.
When the book was published.
No, they were adults. Yeah, sure, absolutely. At the time, fuck yeah. And then only that, but Dave, it's just girls that grow up and read that. It's look.
Right.
But you know what?
But he's always been that, Dave. Even today, he speaks first.
Yeah.
And maybe thinks later. Right? He's always been that way. That's it.
That's the way
he's always been that way. He's written that way. He talks that way. And for better or worse, he doesn't care. And he lives that way.
He does. Well, that wraps up our discussion on Red. And we are on to our exclusive interview with Joel Selvin. Who is Joel Selvin? Joel Selvin is the author who put Red together with Sammy. We talk with him about the entire book and all of the wild different things that Dave and I just discussed in our deep dive discussion here. And there's all kinds of juicy things and kind of interesting the way it all came out, right, Dave? We'll just leave it at that.
Yeah, you definitely want to listen to the whole thing.
Oh, yeah, right up to the very end, folks, because this is an interesting interview. So that's okay. We're excited about having him, and it was an interesting interview nonetheless, and that's all coming up next. Take a listen.
Van Halen's sound, if there is any design to it at all, the sound of Van Halen is meant to spill over all over your turntable and ruin the rest of your records. Our stuff is made to have that kind of combustion to it, that sound, and you'll lose that if you continue to go over and over and 50 times. You'll get it musically correct, but it's going to lose some of that pizzazz. It's got to have heart to it. If you take a Van Halen record and you stick it in your collection, it'll melt all your other records.
Need a laugh? Check out the Funny How Comedy Podcast, which focuses on upbeat conversations with legendary comedians. It's free on Spreaker and iTunes. Check us out on Facebook at Funny How Comedy Podcast, on Twitter at Funny How Podcast, on Instagram at Funny How Comedy Podcast, or email us at funnyhowcomedypodcast@gmail.com.
Hi, this is Larry the Duck Gunn. You're listening to Dave and Dave Unchained.
Hey folks, I'd like to introduce you to the Classic Rock Album by Album podcast. Welcome to the Classic Rock Album by Album podcast, where no stone is left unturned in the show's epic quest to